Croeso to day 11 of 40 days, 40 readings. Today's reading will focus on the siege of Jerusalem. In Zedekiah's 9th year as king, on the 10th day of the 10th month, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylonia led his entire army to attack Jerusalem. The troops set up camp outside the city and built ramps up to the city walls. After a year and a half, all the food in Jerusalem was gone. Then on the 9th day of the 4th month, the Babylonian troops broke through the city walls. That same night, Zedekiah and his soldiers tried to escape through the gates near the royal garden, even though they knew that the enemy had the city surrounded. They headed towards the desert, but the Babylonian troops caught up with them near Jericho. They arrested Zedekiah, but his soldiers scattered in every direction. Zedekiah was taken to Riblah, where Nebuchadnezzar put him on trial and found him guilty. Zedekiah's sons were killed right in front of him. His eyes were then poked out, and he was put in chains and dragged off to Babylon. About a month later, in Nebuchadnezzar's 19th year as king, Nebuzaradan, who was his official in charge of guards, arrived in Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan burned down the Lord's temple and the king's palace and every important building in the city, as well as all the houses. Then he ordered the Babylonian soldiers to break down the walls around Jerusalem. He led away his prisoners and the people left in the city, including those who had become loyal to Nebuchadnezzar. Only some of the poorest people were left behind to work the vineyards and the fields. The Babylonian soldiers took the 2 bronze columns that stood in front of the temple, the 10 movable bronze stands, and the large bronze bowl called the sea. They broke them into pieces so that they could take the bronze to Babylonia. They carried off the bronze things used for worship in the temple, including the pans for hot ashes, and the shovels and snuffers, and all the dishes for incense, as well as the fire pans and the sprinkling bowls. Nebuzaradan ordered his soldiers to take everything made of gold or silver. The pile of bronze from the columns, the stands, and the large bowl that Solomon had made for the temple was too large to be weighed. Each column had been 27 feet tall, with a bronze cap 4.5 feet high. These caps were decorated with bronze designs, some of them like chains and others like pomegranates. Next, Nebuzaradan arrested Seraiah the chief priest, Zephaniah his assistant, and 3 temple officials. Then he arrested one of the army commanders, the king's 5 personal advisors, and the officer in charge of gathering the troops for battle. He also found 60 more soldiers who were still in Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan led them all to Riblah, near Hamath, where Nebuchadnezzar had them killed. The people of Judah no longer lived in their own city. King Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedaliah, son of Ahikam, to rule the few people left living in Judah. When the army officers and the troops heard that Gedaliah was their ruler, the officers met with him at Mizpah. These men were Ishmael, son of Nethiah, Johanan, son of Kareah, Seraiah, son of Tanhumeth, from Netophah, and Jazaniah from Makkah. Gedaliah said to them, "Everything will be fine, I promise. We don't need to be afraid of the Babylonian rulers if we live here peacefully and do what Nebuchadnezzar says." Ishmael was from the royal family, and about 2 months after Gedaliah began his rule, Ishmael and 10 other men went to Mizpah. They killed Gedaliah and his officials, including those from Judah and from Babylonia. After that, the army officers and all the people in Mizpah, whether important or not, were afraid of what the Babylonians might do, so they left Judah and went to Egypt. Jehoiachin was prisoner in Babylon for 37 years. Then Evil Merodach became king of Babylonia, And in the first year of his rule, on the 27th day of the 12th month, he let Jehoiachin out of prison. Evil-Merodach was king to Jehoiachin and honoured him more than any other kings held prisoner there. Jehoiachin was allowed to even wear regular clothes, and he ate at the king's table every day. As long as Jehoiachin lived there, he was paid a daily allowance to buy whatever he needed. Here ends our reading for day 11.